I'm actually grateful for all the things that happened and even the dark things that happened because it did bring me to this point. It absolutely did. And would I wish any of the harmful things and evil things that happened? Of course not. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but I'm grateful for it.
How do you know your memories are true?
Oh, that's great. I trust, and I feel, and I'm very much remembering the feelings that I have and being present with the feelings I have now. If that doesn't make sense to anybody listening, it didn't make sense to me for a long time either, right? And it, how to explain it in a state that, in a feeling state. So it's almost as if you ever walk by something and you just get a shiver and you don't understand where it came from, right? And you just ignore it and you go by, and then the next time it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again, right? It's being able to listen to that and observe it and not be afraid of it. Um, and to again, this was years, decade of therapy to get to this point. It wasn't like this just, daydream that happened, and it was um, different modalities of therapy I went through. For those that are out there that are uh, practice it or understand it or not, the big piece that helped me was like internal family systems, IFS therapy, like, and being able to see protectors and things within yourself and understand why you behave a certain way. And here's a quick unlock key for everybody. Like most of our stuff is childhood trauma. So it all just boils down to it, right? But being able to listen to that and feel into it and trust that your body carries these things and knows these things and it weighs in different areas. That's how I know because I trust myself. I got into a point where it took me 40 years to trust myself, right? And to really believe in my ability to heal, my ability to take care of myself, my ability to understand what is happening throughout all of me and not to hide from it anymore. And once I stopped hiding from it and I brought it into that, and I'm still working. It's not like I'm this, perfect thing. Like I'm working very hard on bringing it all to center, bringing it all to my light and my truth. So I just know it to my core that it's true. I was abused by my father, um, and those memories are so early. It's more of an emotional memory, a sensation of wrongdoing upon my body and that relationship it formed with him in particular, and being attached to him in a way that as I grew older, I realized was manipulation. And then I joined the service when I was 18, 19. I turned 19 in basic training. I was in the Coast Guard. I just retired from the Coast Guard actually about a week ago after 23 years. But when I first joined, I went to San Diego on a ship on the naval base. And I had this sense of being able to just trust everybody, right? And not speak up for myself based on how I was raised, right? And and the patterns repeated, and I trusted some people that, again, not my fault. I fully understand it was not my fault, but I trusted some people that I worked with and some strangers at the same time. And I was drugged and assaulted by three men at the age of 19. And just as I did as a child, I didn't speak of it. I couldn't speak of it. I couldn't comprehend really what had happened to me. Therefore, I suppressed it. Therefore, I behaved the ways I behaved, right? And it came out in different ways throughout my life. From the time I was assaulted in 2004, I didn't speak a word of it even to myself until 2016. So there was a 12-year period where I completely suppressed that memory. And through therapy, I've learned that I did that to protect myself. I did that as a survival mechanism and I avoided it and I filled it with other things, and I felt some of it was good. I had a marriage, I had a child, I did very well with my work, and I progressed rapidly throughout the ranks and did well in that in those senses. But on the inside, I was struggling very hard with my self-esteem, with my self-image, with my alcoholism.
And you said you had a child. You must still have children.
I do. Yes, I have a beautiful 13-year-old son and a beautiful 14-year-old stepson now. So, who came in later about 5 years ago. But yes, my son was born in 2012. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
hmm
Okay. And you're in your second marriage now, or
Yes.
yeah.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And how is your life now?
It's completely different. And it's wonderful. I'm so grateful with where I am and how I've not just with all the trauma things, but just where I am as a man and as a person. And I feel very resilient and strong and supported in my marriage, amongst other things, in my friendships and my community. And it's just a great place to be. And I feel finally at this deep level of acceptance with life, and feeling empowered to live the life that I choose, and to be of service to others and to help myself at the same time. So and there's a lot under there, but like I'm in a good place in my life. In 2004, when it happened to me, there weren't really many. There were some mechanisms in place, but it was not robust, and there was no trust, and so there was nowhere to turn. But when I did open up, excuse me, in 2016, the initial response from the person I first came out to was beautiful. This was a person, her name, I'll share it, is Shannon Nordenberg. She worked at the Coast Guard Academy. Beautiful soul. She's, a healer herself, and just that's the person I felt finally safe to talk to, right? So that interaction was critical for me. Outside of that, it was it was very much many people, not all, but many people in that system were just checking the box. They're just doing their job. And what I found out too is like that system in some ways is designed to protect the system, right? It's designed to um, separate itself and distance itself from any harm and any liability that may have happened to the people that go through those things, right? Um, there are there is care in that system. They refer you to mental health professionals. They make sure that you have a lawyer for the legal side of things. That's good, and that is beneficial to the person, the survivor, going through all those things. But it's cold, and it's very lonely. Even though they can assign you like an advocate or someone, but many of those people, and there's some fantastic advocates out there, of course, but some of the people that I've known in that system are, again, checking the box. They're just filling a role. Their heart's not necessarily in it, and you feel that as because what you're seeking as a survivor, especially in the early stage of it, like you're just seeking for someone to understand you, right? And you have all this confusion about the justice system. You have this confusion about like the struggles that you're going through, and therapy is wonderful and all those things, but it's like there's just so much distrust within yourself, right? And you just were harmed deeply by a system, and now you have to trust that system to fix you or to help you. Like it's really, really difficult. So I had many hurdles, and the investigation itself, again, was very difficult for the investigator to understand because it was 12 years from the time of the incident till I reported. So I understood as far as, putting this person and people in jail was slim. I got that. But it felt like to me that that was kind of their scapegoat. That was their exit strategy. Like they put in the minimal effort to say that they did an investigation, but when it came down to it, they just did not put in the work, right? And I found that out after my investigation closed, and of course, nothing happened, right? So the I was assaulted by one Coast Guard member and two Navy personnel. The Coast Guard member I knew, we were on the same ship, and the two Navy personnel I never saw again, didn't know their names, so that is what it is. But I made the report, gave the person's name. They interviewed me. The investigators interviewed me. They interviewed my perpetrator. They came back and re-interviewed me and said, the person you're accusing says they didn't do it, and we believe them. What do you have to say about that? Okay, and then I said, well, he's lying. And then I went back to him. He got a lawyer. We can't do anything. That was it. And the investigation stopped. They didn't interview other people that I mentioned that might have information or can corroborate anything, or were my friends at the time. Didn't reach out to a single person. And I followed up with friends years later. I asked them, I was like, hey, I gave your name in the investigation. Did anybody reach out to you? And they said, no, we never heard anything about this. Nobody asked us questions, So I knew it was a sham. It was about protecting, like, yep, we did an investigation. It may not have been a quality investigation, but we did one, right? It may not have been thorough. So that was a real bitter pill to swallow. It was really hard at first. And again, that was one of those things I just had to accept at that time and just carry on. I realized it wasn't about that piece of it. What was more important was that I survive this and that I find my peace with it, right? And it was very hard. It was very hard, and I had to face some very tough things inside my history and my family history, and it was all intertwined, and I think that was the fear of me, again, going back to my childhood, to my assault, like the fear of facing all of it, right, was what really was holding me back from even making the initial report. And was the fear of me accepting the investigation, accepting. So there's just all these benchmarks that I eventually cleared. Um, but it was so difficult. It was very hard, and to feel alone in that process was probably it was the hardest part of it. After I remarried, and found more peace in myself, actually right before I remarried, but I felt this need to remove the shame and guilt of my story, right? Because there were still many people within my very close circle that had no idea. My sister knew, my best friend knew, my wife knew. And that was really about it, about what had happened to me. So I decided I would talk to my family, my close family, my siblings, my mom, and tell them what had happened to me. And because my idea was to go public, I was like, you know what, I'm going to make this. I just had this urge or this feeling to make this podcast, and I was like, I want to share my story and I want to put it out there. I want you to know it first. And it was so hard at first to tell them on the phone, and I moved through that, and then I made my podcast, and I shared my story online, and so many people started trickling in with just love and support. And a lot of the Me Too type stuff was like, yep, also this happened to me on the same boat, or the same time. And or just so many things started pouring in, and I felt so grateful for that, right? To be able to have that container for people. And then what happened within the Coast Guard, this is very interesting. Right after I finished my podcast, there was a big scandal. And this was in 2023. There was a large investigation internal in the Coast Guard, of decades of sexual assault, abuse, and cover up at the Coast Guard Academy, like from the 90s all the way up into the early 2000s, or 80s all the way up to the early 2000s. Cases were obviously happening and nothing was being done. The military, all branches are required, mandated by law to report this stuff to Congress so they can track this stuff, so they can allocate funds and resources. And the Coast Guard, among also with other branches, were just sweeping it all under the rug. No problem here, nothing to see here. They weren't filing reports. They weren't prosecuting people. Many, many bad things. And this report that came out was brought to the commandant of the Coast Guard, the head of the Coast Guard at that time, and they refused to release it. They chose not to release it. Somehow it got leaked to CNN, and and like any scandal, there's pushback, there's blowback, and there's this initial knee-jerk reaction by an organization to say, "Oh, we take this seriously. We're going to do the good things," right? And so, like in that process of doing good things, I felt emboldened to become a victim advocate, right? So I went to training, became a victim advocate. I share my story in the class. And my teacher, my instructor at that course said, well, you should probably share your story with with headquarters. They're the people that are revamping the system because of that scandal. I think they would like to hear your story. And I said, okay, absolutely. I spoke to the people of the program. They invited me to Coast Guard headquarters to speak to the entire flag staff of the Coast Guard. So that's all the admirals, all the senior enlisted members, like the very, very top of the totem pole, right? And it was this large conference room with several hundred people. I go up there and I share my truth, and I was embraced and hugged and all these, like all this stuff, and even some dirty looks and incredulousness. But the people that ran we call it SAPR, which is Sexual Assault Prevention, Response, and Recovery Program, they said, man, and they're civilians, doctors, some of them, and we love your story. We love what you're saying. We love to use your story in training for the Coast Guard. Would you come with us to Alameda in San Francisco and record your story? And I said, at this point, I'm all in. I'm like, okay, yes, anything to help. I'll be there, right? So I fly to Alameda about a month later. I meet two other survivors, and all three of us film our stories together. And it was this moving moment. We're still very close friends through all this. And then about a month later, we were told that the stories were going to be released in April of that year, in 2024, that when in April is Sexual Assault Prevention Month, right? And they were going to use our stories, and they were proud of us, and nothing happened, right? And then our stories were buried, and then somehow a memo got leaked that said, roughly, the quote was similar to saying that the stories that are told in these videos make it seem like there is still a problem with sexual assault within the Coast Guard instead of a thing of the past. Therefore, we will not release them. So, next phone call I get is from the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Homeland Security. They asked me to give statements about the cover-up, and I became a whistleblower. And then within a few months, in August of 2024, myself and one of the other survivors are testifying before the Senate on a Senate field hearing with Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut. Um, and since then, and through all that, again, I spoke my truth. I was with four other amazing people on that hearing. All of those people that shook my hand, all those people at the headquarters meeting where I was getting hugs and, like I said, some incredulous looks. I didn't hear from any of them ever again. All the people that said they supported me, all this, it was just dead, dead silence. And I realized that I burned a few bridges by doing what I did, but it was worth it, because I spoke my truth, and so much has come from that. My personal journey just accelerated after that, which is beautiful, right? And those are the people with me. Uh, we just formed this coalition, this bond, right? Um, and when our hearing went out public, it was broadcast live, obviously, as all hearings are. Another survivor reached out to us. Her name is Emily Hand. And she said, I'm also a survivor, and I absolutely love what you are doing, but I feel like we need to do something together. I don't know what that looks like, but let's talk. So we talked. And myself, Emily Hand, Megan Clement, and Joanne Cloud, the four of us teamed up and we talked about it. And we said, let's start a group. Let's start a peer-to-peer support group that is outside the Coast Guard, that's outside the military, that supports people, that can be that voice, that community that people really need. We all had very similar experiences in the aspect of, like, we felt alone, right? We all felt alone, even though we had a lawyer or we had this or we had that, like we just felt alone. And it's like we don't want anybody ever to feel alone again if we can do something about it. So we did something about it. So we created our nonprofit. It's called Safe Waters. We launched about a year and a half ago now, and it's just been this beautiful unfolding, right? And it's just this space has been created, and the people that have come to us for help and or even just to offer support, it's just a really beautiful thing. And so now we travel the country, we visit different units, we talk to people, and as we do that, survivors come in and ask for support, and we meet them wherever they are, right? And there's some people where they were just assaulted 2 days ago and they need help, or there's people that, hey, I retired 20 years ago and I never reported it. Like, what do I like? And they're just facing it for the first time, or maybe they're in a good place. So within our Safe Waters community, we have male and female survivors ready to assist anybody of any background, orientation, gender, religion. Everyone is welcome to receive the healing.